Borderline and suicide. Why 1 in 10 can't take it anymore. Dr. Paul Soloff. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to carry the entire world on their shoulders? Why certain souls feel life so intensely that every breath hurts? Today, we're going to talk about haunting numbers. Numbers that reveal a cruel truth about borderline personality disorder. 1 in every 10 people with BPD cannot make it to the end of the journey. Not out of weakness, not by choice, but because of pain that surpasses any imaginable human limit. Imagine waking up every day feeling like your skin was ripped off during the night. Every emotion is lightning that pierces through your body. Every whispered word resonates like a scream. Every disapproving look transforms into a death sentence. This is how someone with BPD experiences the world. And when we say that 70% of these people attempt to take their own lives, we're not talking about cold statistics. We're talking about human beings who have reached the limit of what's bearable. Maria was 22 years old when she made her first attempt. She told doctors she didn't want to die. She just wanted the pain to stop. A pain so deep it had no name, so constant it became her only companion. The numbers are merciless. 80% of people with BPD have suicidal thoughts. 52% make attempts. 6% achieve what they didn't want to achieve. We live in a society that romanticizes emotional intensity. Movies portray passionate people as tragic heroes. Songs celebrate broken hearts as art. But nobody talks about what happens when this intensity becomes a prison, when every emotion is an internal earthquake, when love transforms into despair and despair into haunting thoughts. Borderline personality disorder doesn't choose its victims by social class, intelligence, or beauty. It simply chooses hearts that feel too much, minds that process every stimulus as if it were a matter of life and death. And maybe it really is. For those living with BPD, every day is a battle for emotional survival, a silent war that few can understand. But here's the cruelest contradiction. The same people who suffer from this emotional intensity are capable of the most loving gestures. They're the ones who cry at sad movies, who care deeply about others, who feel the beauty of the world overwhelmingly. BPD isn't the absence of love, it's excess of everything, including pain. The data reveals something disturbing about our society. While the suicide rate in the general population hovers around 0.2%, people with BPD present rates between 8 and 10%. This means someone with borderline has 50 times more chances of not being able to continue the journey, 50 times more probability of finding in final silence the peace they never achieved in life. Even worse, we discovered that men with BPD have different risk patterns. While women make more attempts, men succeed more frequently. 1/3 of male youth suicides can be attributed to BPD. These are young people who never received a diagnosis, never understood why they felt different, never knew there was a name for their pain. When we analyze ages, we find another frightening fact. Attempts happen early, usually in their 20s. But completed suicides occur later, between 30 and 40 years old. It's as if the person spent an entire decade trying to find relief from their pain. And when all hopes are exhausted, when all treatments fail, they make the final decision. The most tragic thing is discovering that many of these deaths happen when the person is not in treatment. Not because they abandoned it, but because the system failed, because it couldn't offer the necessary help at the right moment. Because we still treat mental health issues as luxury, not as basic human survival necessity. Albert Camus once said, "There is only one truly serious philosophical problem: suicide." Judging whether life is worth living or not is answering philosophy's fundamental question. For Camus, facing the absurd of existence was the greatest act of human courage. He didn't know that decades later, we would discover people who face this absurd multiplied by 1,000 every day. The French philosopher spoke about the absurd as conflict between human need for meaning and the irrational silence of the world. Imagine this sensation amplified to the extreme. Imagine feeling this conflict not as philosophical concept, but as physical reality that burns inside. This is how someone with BPD experiences existence. Every day is a fight against the existential absurd that Camus described. Aristotle believed virtue was in the middle ground, in moderation between extremes. Those with BPD live perpetually in extremes. They love intensely or hate deeply, feel overwhelming joy or mortal sadness. For these people, Aristotelian middle ground isn't virtue, it's impossibility. They can't live in the gray zone of emotional moderation. Socrates defended that knowing oneself was the greatest wisdom. But what about when knowing yourself means confronting an ocean of pain? When self-understanding reveals not peace, but torment? For those with BPD, self-knowledge can be more curse than blessing. Knowing their patterns means recognizing their infinite capacity to suffer. Nietzsche spoke about the Superman who would create his own values. Someone with BPD is constantly creating and destroying values. Today, the loved person is salvation. Tomorrow is perdition. Values change with emotional intensity, not out of inconsistency, but for emotional survival. It's the defense mechanism of those who feel too much. Schopenhauer saw life as constant suffering. For him, to desire was to suffer, and achieving the desired was just preparation for new suffering. Those with BPD live this pessimistic philosophy on their own skin. Every emotional conquest is temporary. Every moment of peace is just an interval between internal storms. Sartre said we are condemned to freedom, that we need to constantly choose who we are. For someone with BPD, this freedom is unbearable burden. Choosing who to be when your identity changes according to circumstances. When you don't know if the person you love today will be the same you'll hate tomorrow. Existential freedom becomes emotional prison. Heraclitus taught that you can't step into the same river twice. Everything flows, everything changes. People with BPD live this philosophy radically. They constantly change because they feel each moment as new reality. The river of their emotions never stops flowing, and sometimes the current is too strong for them to swim against it. Epicurus sought ataraxia, tranquility of the soul. He preached we should avoid unnecessary pains and seek simple pleasures. But how to achieve tranquility when your neurobiology was programmed to feel everything in high voltage? How to seek simple pleasures when every stimulus is too intense? For those with BPD, Epicurean ataraxia isn't philosophy, it's impossible fantasy. Descartes divided mind and body, creating the dualism that still haunts us. Those with BPD live proof that this division is illusion. Every emotion has physical manifestation. Every psychological pain burns in the body. Every negative thought generates real symptoms. Mind and body are one system in constant collapse. Buddhist tradition speaks about suffering as inevitable part of existence. The first noble truth is that life is suffering, but even Buddha didn't imagine suffering as intense as what someone with BPD experiences. Where Buddhism sees suffering as teacher, BPD transforms suffering into executioner. St. Augustine fought against his passions, seeking divine peace. His confessions reveal a man tormented by contradictory desires. Someone with BPD lives Augustinian confessions every day. Every relationship is battle between love and fear. Every decision is conflict between need and terror of abandonment. When we dive into scientific data, we discover patterns that explain this philosophical pain. Dr. Paul Soloff, renowned psychiatrist specialist in BPD, conducted studies that revolutionized our understanding about suicide in this population. His findings reveal that people with BPD who commit suicide have specific profile. They generally have fewer psychiatric hospitalizations, suggesting they weren't receiving adequate help. Soloff's work showed something counterintuitive. Those who commit suicide in BPD don't necessarily make more previous attempts. Actually, they may make fewer. This breaks the myth that multiple attempts are always calls for help. Sometimes the person plans silently. Sometimes the first attempt is the last. This finding changed prevention protocols worldwide. Dr. Shirley Yen from Harvard identified 3 factors that predict suicide risk in BPD with frightening precision. First, identity disturbance. When the person doesn't know who they are, they can't imagine a future. Second, chronic feelings of emptiness, when nothing fills the internal existential hole. Third, frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, when fear of loneliness surpasses fear of death. Yen's research revealed that these 3 symptoms together create perfect storm for suicidal behavior. It's no coincidence they're exactly the most debilitating aspects of BPD. Fragmented identity prevents future planning. Chronic emptiness corrodes any hope. Terror of abandonment makes death preferable to loneliness. Marsha Linehan revolutionized BPD treatment by creating dialectical behavior therapy, but few know she herself had the disorder. She spent years hospitalized, made multiple suicide attempts. When she finally revealed her story in 2011, she shocked the scientific community. The woman who saved thousands of lives almost lost her own. Linehan developed DBT because traditional medicine failed her. She discovered that people with BPD need to learn skills that others develop naturally: emotion regulation, distress tolerance, mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness. It's not that they're incapable. It's that nobody ever taught these skills to brains that function at emotional high speed. Linehan's work proved that BPD has effective treatment, that people can learn to surf emotional waves instead of being swallowed by them. Her own recovery is living proof that BPD diagnosis isn't death sentence. It's a call to develop extraordinary capacities for emotional survival. Dr. Joel Paris, one of the world's greatest BPD specialists, conducted longitudinal studies that followed patients for decades. He discovered that most people with BPD improve significantly over time. The most destructive symptoms tend to diminish after 30 years old. Impulsivity decreases, relationships stabilize, identity consolidates. Paris documented that suicide rate in BPD, although high, is concentrated in the first years of the disorder. After 40 years old, risk diminishes drastically. This offers crucial hope. If the person can survive the most turbulent years, chances of recovery increase exponentially. It's like crossing a storm. If you hold firm, you'll reach the other side. Paris's studies also revealed protective factors that diminish suicide risk. Stable relationships, even if few. Work or activity that gives meaning. Consistent treatment, even if not perfect. Each factor protects against suicidal impulsivity. Each genuine human connection is safety rope in moment of crisis. Neurobiological research shows that brains of people with BPD process emotions differently. The amygdala, fear center, is hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for regulation, is less efficient. It's like having supersensitive fire alarm connected to defective sprinkler system. Any stimulus triggers alarm, but there's no effective way to put out emotional fire. Neuroimaging studies reveal that with adequate treatment, these brain differences can be modified. Intensive therapy literally reconstructs neural circuits. The brain that once processed everything as threat learns to distinguish between real danger and false alarm. It's neuroplasticity in action. It's scientific proof that change is possible. Epidemiological data shows that BPD affects between 2 and 3% of population. This means millions of people living with this emotional intensity. They're not rare or exotic cases. They're neighbors, colleagues, family members, people who wake up every day facing battle that most can't even imagine exists. What's most impressive in the data is the difference between attempts and completed suicides. 70% make attempts, but only 6% succeed. This reveals something fundamental. Most attempts are desperate calls for help. They're extreme ways of communicating pain they can't express otherwise. They're silent screams, asking for someone to see their suffering. Studies on survivors of suicide attempts in BPD show interesting pattern. Many report immediate relief after surviving, as if the attempt had released accumulated emotional pressure. This suggests that suicidal behavior in BPD doesn't always reflect genuine desire to die. Sometimes it's desperate attempt to relieve unbearable psychological pain. Research on risk factors identified childhood trauma as central element. 90% of people with BPD suffered some type of childhood trauma: sexual abuse, emotional neglect, domestic violence. BPD is, in many cases, the way the brain found to survive the unbearable. It's extreme adaptation to extreme circumstances. Anna discovered she had BPD at 25 after 3 suicide attempts. She grew up in family where showing emotion was sign of weakness. She learned to hide feelings until they exploded destructively. Every relationship ended in catastrophe. Every job was abandoned in emotional crisis, until discovering her intensity wasn't defect. It was a different way of experiencing the world. Carlos was 18 when he made his first attempt. He couldn't understand why he felt empty inside while everyone around seemed happy. Every romantic rejection was end of world. Every parental criticism was confirmation he was worthless. It took years to discover his brain processed emotions in amplified way, that he wasn't crazy, he was sick, and sickness has treatment. Beatrice cut her arms since she was 15. She said it was the only way to relieve emotional pressure she felt inside. When physical pain replaced emotional pain, she found moments of peace. She didn't want to hurt herself. She just wanted to feel something different from constant anguish that consumed her. She discovered she was using wounds as primitive form of emotional regulation. Roberto made intense relationships that lasted weeks. He fell madly in love, gave himself completely, then destroyed everything for fear of being abandoned. He preferred to end first rather than risk being left. Every breakup confirmed his certainty that he was impossible to love, until learning that his fear of abandonment created exactly what he most feared. Fernanda went through dozens of therapists without significant improvement. Each professional tried different approach, but nothing worked. She felt like lost case, person incapable of change, until finding therapists specialized in BPD who explained it wasn't that she resisted treatment, it was that she needed specific treatment for her type of suffering. It was like finding right key for lock she'd been trying to open for years. Dr. Anthony Bateman, pioneer in mentalization-based therapy, discovered that people with BPD have specific difficulty. They can't understand their own and others' mental states during emotional stress. When they're calm, they're capable of sophisticated introspection. When they're emotionally activated, they lose this capacity completely. Bateman's research showed that this loss of mentalization explains many apparently irrational behaviors in BPD. The person who today swears eternal love and tomorrow hates the same person isn't lying. In each moment, they genuinely feel what they express. The problem is, they lose capacity to integrate contradictory emotional states into coherent narrative about themselves and others. Peter Fonagy, Bateman's collaborator, developed theory about reflective function. According to him, people with BPD didn't adequately develop capacity to reflect on their own mental states. It's as if they had broken emotional mirror. They see fragments of themselves, but can't form integrated and stable image. Attachment studies show that majority of people with BPD had inconsistent caregivers in childhood, sometimes loving, sometimes rejecting. The child never could predict which version of caregiver they would encounter. They developed emotional hypervigilance as survival mechanism. They learned to read subtle signs of mood changes in others to protect themselves. This hypervigilance becomes curse in adult life. The person detects emotional changes in others that even they themselves haven't perceived. They interpret micro-expressions as signs of imminent rejection. They live in constant state of alert for relational threats that frequently don't exist. It's like having emotional radar calibrated to detect storms that never arrive. Otto Kernberg, psychoanalyst pioneer in personality disorder study, described BPD as result of interrupted emotional development. According to him, the person gets stuck in infantile stage, where world is divided between totally good and totally bad. They can't integrate positive and negative aspects into nuanced view of reality. Kernberg observed that people with BPD live in primitive psychological world where other people are saviors or persecutors. Today, the therapist is hero who understands everything. Tomorrow they're villain who doesn't care. It's not conscious manipulation. It's genuine way they experience relationships. It's as if they saw world through emotional lenses that amplify contrasts and eliminate intermediate tones. Kernberg's theory about splitting explains why relationships of people with BPD are so turbulent. They can't maintain stable image of the other when emotionally activated. The loved person transforms into enemy in matter of hours, not out of malice, but due to neurobiological incapacity to integrate contradictory aspects into coherent vision. Here we arrive at the great lie our society tells about mental health. The lie that people with BPD are manipulative, that they use suicidal threats to control others, that they're lost cases, toxic people who should be avoided. This narrative isn't just false, it's lethal, because it increases stigma and diminishes access to treatment. The truth is, nobody chooses to have BPD. Nobody wakes up in morning deciding to feel emotions overwhelmingly. Nobody plans to develop pathological fear of abandonment. BPD is result of combination between genetic vulnerability and traumatic environment. It's adaptive responsive brain to impossible circumstances. When we label people with BPD as manipulative, we ignore that their extreme behaviors are desperate attempts at emotional survival. When person threatens suicide, they're not trying to control. They're communicating level of pain they can't express otherwise. It's call for help in only language they know. Mental health system perpetuates this discrimination by treating people with BPD as difficult patients. Many professionals refuse to treat them. Others offer inadequate treatment based on prejudices. Result is that people who most need help are those who least manage to access quality treatment. Pharmaceutical industry also contributes to problem by selling illusion that BPD can be cured with medications. Although medications can help with specific symptoms, there's no magic pill for BPD. Effective treatment requires intensive therapy, lifestyle changes, and mainly support network that understands nature of disorder. Sensationalist media portrays people with BPD as movie villains, always unstable, always dangerous, always destined for failure. These representations create stigma that makes life even more difficult for those already facing daily internal battles. It's as if society conspired to make recovery impossible. Family members frequently receive advice to distance themselves, protect themselves, establish rigid boundaries. Although boundaries are important, emotional abandonment can be devastating for those with BPD. It's like turning back on person who's drowning because they're making too much noise asking for help. The great revelation is that people with BPD aren't incapable of change. They're capable of extraordinary transformations when they receive adequate treatment. Marsha Linehan is a perfect example. From chronic patient who spent years hospitalized, she became one of world's greatest authorities on BPD treatment. Her journey proves recovery isn't just possible. It's probable when right conditions are present, but you need to know something fundamental. If you have BPD, your sensitivity isn't defect. It's gift that world hasn't learned to value yet. People with BPD frequently are extraordinary artists, loyal friends, empathetic professionals. Their capacity to feel deeply, when adequately channeled, becomes emotional superpower. First step for change is accepting you didn't choose to have BPD, but can choose how to deal with it. It's not about eliminating your emotional intensity. It's about learning to surf these waves instead of being swallowed by them. It's about transforming your sensitivity from vulnerability into strength. Effective treatments for BPD exist and work. Dialectical behavior. Therapy teaches practical skills to manage emotional crises. Mentalization-based therapy helps understand own mental states. Schema-focused therapy works deep patterns of thought and behavior. There's no single treatment, but there's real hope. Follow-up studies show 70% of people with BPD present significant improvement after 2 years of adequate treatment. 90% improve after 10 years. This means BPD isn't perpetual sentence. It's treatable condition with positive prognosis when approached correctly. Your support network is crucial. Family and friends who educate themselves about BPD can be difference between life and death. They need to understand that your extreme behaviors are symptoms, not choices. That your pain is real, even when expressed in a way that seems exaggerated. That unconditional love doesn't mean accepting destructive behaviors, but offers secure base for change. Medications can help with specific symptoms like depression, anxiety, or impulsivity. Although they don't cure BPD, they can make therapy more effective. Antidepressants, mood stabilizers, and low-dose antipsychotics are frequently used. Important thing is working with specialized psychiatrist who understands BPD particularities. Support groups connect you with people who understand your experience viscerally. There's no judgment when you explain to someone who also has BPD why you fought with best friend over a look. There's understanding, identification, and shared hope. It's community of survivors helping each other. Self-care in BPD requires specific strategies. Mindfulness techniques to connect with present moment. Breathing exercises to calm hyperactive nervous system. Activities that provide sense of achievement and pleasure. Routines that create external stability when everything inside is chaotic. Remember, suicidal thoughts are symptom, not absolute truth. When your mind whispers that death is only way out, it's lying. It's under influence of brain chemistry altered by emotional pain. These moments pass. They always pass. Your task is to survive until they pass. If you're thinking about suicide now, stop everything you're doing and seek help immediately. Go to nearest emergency room. Call someone you trust. You don't need to face this pain alone. There are people trained to help exactly at this moment. Arm yourself with knowledge the truth simply liberates.